What's up, Denver? Chris Lopez here, and today we are doing another deal analysis on a house hack with an ADU in LoHi. So a cool property with some really cool exit strategies and ways to rent it out as well. So my co-host is Lauren Valinoti. Lauren, good morning. How are you doing?
Hey, doing good. Excited to be here today.
I'm glad to have you back in the studio. So this is a deal that, you worked on, you put together. So in a couple words, what was it and why'd you like it?
I love this one because it was a cash flowing Highlands deal.
Well, those are all the time out there.
Which was really exciting to find. It was a beautiful old Victorian home, all in the hot spots where everybody wants to be, that when we run the numbers, you're going to be pretty impressed with the cash flow on.
And our guest and investor who bought this property is Brian Alperin. Brian, good morning, man. Glad to have you in here.
Good morning, Chris. Yeah,
and
glad to be here.
I'm excited to really dive into these numbers because your background, you've been an underwriter, you've been in private equity, so you're going to have a really good handle on the numbers. So I'm excited to dig in the spreadsheet with you and run these scenarios. I know you did your due diligence.
Yep.
So I'm excited to pick your brain. So to set it up, give everyone the background about who you are, Brian.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. So I started my career in commercial banking. Had touched a lot of different areas within lending, but did a lot of commercial real estate in California. Number of large commercial real estate projects in San Francisco and the Bay Area, and then transitioned into private equity. Originally on the real estate side, doing historic rehabilitations around the country. So these are historic buildings that we would go in and renovate. And then most recently have moved out of real estate into renewable energy and came out to Denver to build a renewable energy office out here. But still have a lot of interest in real estate, and so on the personal side have been getting involved in Denver.
Great. So you've got background in some really big projects, which I'm sure there are some similarities to house hacking, but probably a lot of differences as well. So why house hacking?
Well, I mean, the way I looked at it was, it made a lot of sense for us to buy a home in Denver, versus just renting. We did that, our initial years we came out here and we're just kind of learning the market and getting comfortable and also, making sure it's somewhere we wanted to be at least for a few years. But once we realized that we wanted to buy a place, I guess maybe it's the investor in me that it's hard to look at it purely as just a home, and when it was looking at it for how do we kind of help build towards our financial goals and find that balance of something that is the right home for us, but also will help us get us some experience in real estate investing and offset part of the mortgage with some cash flow and just kind of accelerate our goals in building a bit of a real estate portfolio.
And for the house hacking, it's you and your fiancée, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And I remember when we first, I don't know, one of the first times we connected, I was I can tell you this now, I was a little worried because you wanted a nice place, but also have it work for, I think, either your parents or your fiancée's parents to come out, and there was a lot of balls to juggle on here, and the more to juggle, the harder it is to find a good investment. So I was a little bit concerned about that, but you guys made it happen.
Yeah, it was a pretty long list. We that was I think one of the main challenges here was I'm used to making investment decisions every day and looking at potential investment opportunities, but then looking at that also through the lens of what's going to make my fiance happy, what's a good place for my parents to come out and visit and maybe even live in, and having kind of that granny suite, if you will, that they could stay in. So balancing all that with something that also felt good as an investment was one of the main challenges here.
Have you figured out how to build a spreadsheet to put in the wishes and wants of the fiancé and the parents? Have you been able to quantify that yet? Because if you do, I want a license.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, though, it took looking at some properties and Lauren can speak to some of the first properties that we looked at. I think were great investment properties. But then ultimately, I started to uncover some of the reasons they didn't work for my fiancé. And in conversations with my parents. So, it was a little bit of a explorative process there to narrow that down. But we ultimately, we're both kind of quantitatively minded. So we ended up creating kind of this grid, I guess, or spreadsheet of, her list of items, my list of items, and assigning, percentage rankings and scores for different projects. So like there was a bit of a process there to, see what, checked our boxes and even down to kind of, our long-term goals for, on the personal side and values and things and what these different options helped us get there. So I don't know if we ended up, actually using that number, so to speak, but I think just going through the process was helpful in identifying all those different items that were important for each of us.
Yeah, I love that exercise. I think that's a great thing for other couples to look at. I mean, because Lauren, this is something we work with all the time, and it's you're balancing the investment, balancing one person's wants, the other person's wants, and a lot of times the couples have different wants and priorities, and figure out, hey, where does it all blend together? So we're going to start diving the spreadsheet here. So for people listening to the podcast, this will be in the show notes, or check out the YouTube video, but we're going to talk through the numbers, or talk through the spreadsheet. We put the numbers in here and kind of tell the story of it. So this is a house hack with ADU in LoHi.
Yep.
And so to kind of go in that area, as you are setting up searches, and as Lauren, as you guys started walking properties, what were some of the basic parameters, and what was the search process like?
So location, we found out, was a pretty big importance to both of them. And then mostly just the setup for privacy. Getting his fiance on board of doing the house hack and sharing a space, with potential strangers. Privacy was definitely a big ticket item for them. So just being able to identify, mother-in-law suites, or a kitchen in a basement, separate entrance, anything like of those kind of search terms is what we were looking for. At the same time, we were also looking at duplexes. So we were doing a multifamily search for them also.
Okay. And I mean, just what was the process? You guys would walk properties, evaluate, talk things, and just refine, right? Mm-hmm. Any big ahas or things that came out as you walked the first few properties and then got the reality check?
Well, I think the first property we walked, from an investment perspective, we actually liked, but I think we the day we walked it went into contract before we had a chance to put an offer in. So I mean that I think gave us some idea of what the market was like, and that we had to be able to move quickly. The other one that stuck out in my mind, we walked a property in Littleton that again from an investment perspective, I liked. It was a duplex that had a in-place tenant in the sort of second unit, and in the main unit there was a garage that already had a bathroom in place, and would have been a fairly easy conversion to kind of add an additional space there that we could rent out. So when you factored that in, it cash flowed really nicely. But that was one where we, kind of went down the path, and we're getting ready to make an offer. And ultimately, my fiance kind of had some cold feet about, things like privacy in terms of, the unit that we would be living in. It just was basically had a lot of windows and not much privacy to neighbors in the street and everything like that. And so, it's just those factors that we identified that then, helped inform and narrow down the search after that point. But that was, I think, the biggest hiccup, and that told me that, we needed to, kind of regroup and really identify the factors that were important to her. And so that, that's what we did, and I think that helped us ultimately narrow down on the search a bit further.
Great. So moving to the property that you found, went under contract, closed on, and now live in. Yep. We'll put primary residence in here. We'll come back to the finance in a second. What was the purchase price on here?
So it was about $920,000.
Okay, so we'll put about $920 in here. And the reason I skipped the financing is because this brings us into jumbo loan territory.
Right. Yeah.
I know we ran some scenarios, talked some different case studies, or talked them out. What did you end up picking for the jumbo loan? How'd you structure it? Because you had some really good options as you researched and talked to different banks.
Yeah, we looked at a lot of different options. I think my biggest debate was doing a 20% versus a 10% down on the jumbo loan. We could have gotten a slightly better rate if we did 20% down, but it would have been a lot of additional equity. And in talking to one of my mentors, he basically said you're in a once in a lifetime opportunity right now in interest rates, and you should leverage it as much as you can. So and then just looking at how long it would take us to kind of rebuild that equity and go to the next property, we ultimately decided doing the 10% down jumbo loan option.
All right, so we're going to put the down payment at 10%.
Yeah.
And we'll come back and talk more about this a little bit. Acquisition cost, to ballpark closing cost on here.
Yeah, so we got seller credits that covered most the acquisition costs. I don't think we really came out of pocket much in terms of other than some of the inspections and things that we paid for, but it wasn't a very large number. I can't recall exactly what it was, but maybe a couple $1,000s or something.
Well, how much were your seller credits?
It's like
$13,000.
That's a good chunk, right?
$13,000.
Okay.
$13,000.
So I'm just going to put $13,000 seller credits, acquisition costs. $10,000 or so?
Yeah.
And then, okay, so I know we kind of jumped a little bit there. So we're filling the spreadsheet here.
Sure.
So you got 10% down. What was your mortgage insurance like?
So there was no mortgage insurance on the jumbo loan.
Great. So I'm gonna zero this out.
Yep.
As Lauren and I have learned how to do this a few times now. So I just put upfront single paid in the spreadsheet and then zeroed it out in the initial repair cost. So purchase price was $920, which doesn't necessarily mean that was the list price, but you guys walked it, you ran the numbers, you liked it, you put the offer in.
Yeah.
And the very first step we do is that due diligence inspection item.
Right.
So what was the inspection process like?
So this one, the house was built, I want to say in like 1895. So an older home. We just got the regular inspector out there. This property was unique because the seller had just kind of rehabbed the property. When you first walk in, the first floor, it was like living space and then a dining room and then the kitchen area over there. So what they ended up doing was getting rid of the dining room, keeping the living room. They pushed the kitchen up forward. Then they turned that original kitchen into the secondary unit. So there's another kitchen there, but that's for the private unit. And so they had done some upgrades to the property. They put in a new sewer line. The city made them do the new sewer line because they were putting in a garage. And so during the inspection, we found, some concerns about the new electrical panel that was put in there. Brian did a great job of looking through all the construction permits, looking at everything, making sure everything was permitted. The biggest thing that we were concerned about also too is the 2 times that we walked it during inspection period, there was an active leak happening. And so the seller and the agent really wasn't around very much during this time, so we really couldn't get very much direction of what was the source of the leak. So we really had to do our own homework and detective work. We finally were able to figure out that the clothes washer, something just really weird was going on. It would just on its own fill up with water and wouldn't drain. And so the water was coming out of the washer machine, and there was a return vent or supply vent for the HVAC right there, and it was going into that HVAC pipe, and in the basement, it was trickling out from the HVAC pipes. So we finally were able to isolate. Nothing major. It was just a defective washer. There was no damage that was really done to the flooring or anything like that. But the biggest concern was the structure. They had put in some bracing. Again, it's a 2-story brick home built in 1890s. You're going to have some settling and you're going to need some reinforcements. The previous owner had put in some structure bracing, but it's definitely not up to code. It was like some 2x4s sandwiched in with a couple other pieces of wood. And so we had to bring in a structural engineer. and get quotes and go back to them to get all of these items repaired. And this was a big process, a turning point in the process of this deal, because it was on the higher price of their budget. First time home buyers, and they didn't want to get into something that was going to overstretch them in like maintenance. So we initially went into the contract of having a limited inspection clause in it, trying to signal to the seller we're going to be pretty easy to work with, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, the laundry list of items of concern was enough risk to them to want to terminate the contract. So we kind of had to pivot our strategy with the seller and, say, what, after doing inspection, we didn't realize all of these items were wrong, and it's going to cost them out of this deal. So if we want to keep it whole and together, we're going to need to come to some understanding here. So I think it was like a 2-page inspection objection. And, Brian did a really good job, and we worked together to negotiate, a new sewer line replacement. They only fixed half of the sewer line. So we were able to get them to completely fix that, and then, give him a pretty good hefty chunk in seller concessions for the structural issues, or just for, getting the bracing up to like code. And then, like I said, it was remodeled, and, they just kind of, there was some door handles missing and just some like cosmetic things of when you get to that price point, if you're going to remodel a home, and we needed them to tweak a couple of these things. So, and
how were the sellers how receptive were they to this?
I mean, it wasn't what they wanted, but they had been on the market for a little bit. This house was on the market originally the way that it laid out, how I described it, and then the real estate agent does a lot of really cool. The listing agent does a lot of really cool deals around town, and it was his friend's house. So he was the one that came in and assessed the property and said, hey, I think that if we do these tweaks to the property, we can add a lot of value, because what they listed it for a year ago was a lot more than what they had listed it, whenever Brian bought it, for that additional value. And so, they were initially not happy about all of the asks, but I think they were kind of at a point to where they wanted it off the books and they just wanted to move forward. And so they met us in the middle. I think we started with like a $25,000 ask on the seller credits, and met us half of it.
Great. So you got the second half, or the second part of the sewer line replaced, which is a huge win. You got $13,000 in seller credits.
They painted the garage too.
Yeah, and then there's some like cosmetic
some little
things
like
that
that.
fixed.
They put the doorknobs in that were missing. So there were some cosmetic things that were not a huge deal, but nice that they covered.
I'm surprised they did, because that cosmetic stuff is usually like like a lot of times a no-go area when it comes to inspection negotiations. But well, great job, guys. And then in terms of initial repair cost, I know you got seller credits at some work and we'll get into more. What do you have to spend on the property to get it fixed up? Approximately, and then we'll talk about your business plan in a minute as well. Come back and update it.
Yeah, so we spent some money that wasn't necessarily repair costs, but I would say we did some improvements. So I don't know if you want to include that here, but we'll include it here. When I was really thinking about the ADU and renting to traveling nurses. In my research, I think it's something like 80% of them are females, women, and they also, one of their top concerns is security. So I think LoHi is a really safe area, but just to, be competitive, we decided to put a security system in, and so we spent about $2,000 on getting, a really nice security system in there that was, sort of a nice to have, but not critical. And then the other big spend, just sort of for a quality of life, since we're going to be living there, I wanted a separate zone for the HVAC so that they had their own thermostat. We didn't have to be sharing.
Yep.
So that ended up being about $4,000 to get that. It was that, plus we added some an additional vent to get some additional heating in our living room. So those were the big ticket items that, that we.
What about like any initial repair costs you have to do that you use the seller credit money for?
The the big piece is going to be that structural, which we haven't done yet. I mean, it wasn't something that like was has to be done now kind of thing, but something that is on the list for, at some point we're going to do, and that'll probably be about $5,000. So, but we at this point, the stuff that's there, it's been there for years, and it's okay, as long as, it's just not up to code. So if we were ever to sell the property, I think we would get it fixed, and we're monitoring it to make sure, at some point we might need to spend that money to get that fixed. But it wasn't like a critical repair we had to do right off the bat.
And it's been there for 140 years or so, 130 years. So
yeah. And then what about the initial cost to get the additional dwelling furnished? How much do you think you spent?
Yeah, so I think on just furniture, all said and done, it was about $1,500. And then we were able to reuse a number of certain things like silverware and that kind of stuff. We just had some extra, so we were able to, kind of between IKEA and Amazon and reusing stuff, we kept costs, pretty low on that front. So that was good.
Great.
Yeah, so that's great. So I put all these numbers in the initial repair costs, including that the negative $13,000 offset the mortgage.
Yeah.
So we can just say all in. I mean, for down payment, acquisition costs, seller credits, getting it up and running, you're all in for about just under $100,000. That sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll get to more in the business plan here in a couple cells. What was your interest rate on the jumbo?
3.375.
So that is great. And is that an ARM? Is that a fixed?
No, it's
rate?
fixed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fixed over 30 years?
Yeah.
Wow, you got a jumbo fixed at 3 3/8?
Yeah.
Ooh, I forgot. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually, so the debate was we could have actually gone sub 3 if we did 20% down. So that was the big debate. I mean, it was like, when could you get a sub 3% jumbo loan? But we ended up, when kind of played with the numbers quite a bit, and ended up with the additional leverage.
Yeah, an extra $100,000 is not worth half a point.
Yeah,
I don't think.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to run this? Because I think your plan here for this property is to stay here for a bit. Actually, let me rephrase that question into a question. Sure. What is your plan for the property? Like for you living there, and then your business plan with it?
Sure. So the long-term, I guess, plan or vision was to have a space, So both my fiance and I have older parents, but especially mine. I'm an only child, and I could see a day potentially when they might want to move in full time, and into like an additional unit or something that we had, to be closer. And in the meantime, I think there's a high likelihood that they'll want to visit for an extended period of time. So I like the idea of having something that was a little bit separate that they could use, and then when they're not using it, we could rent it short or medium term to offset some of the mortgage. So the plan is, live in place in the main unit, rent out that ADU for part of the year, and then maybe, for a month or two, my parents might use it out of the year. And longer term, it's a great space and a great neighborhood, so I could see us sticking around there for a while. But if we wanted to move on to a larger space or something like that, we would either, depending on where prices are at, we could look to sell it, or we might just, try to turn it into a full-on investment property and rent both units.
Because you guys don't have any plans like moving out in like a year or two to repeat this, right? You're kind of buying this and staying here for a few, like 3 to 5 years, I remember?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the plan was to stay in place at least a few years, and, reassess at that point. So, it's not your traditional, 1-year house hack.
Yep. So let's run this while you're living there, because that's that was
sure.
one of your main goals, was to having a great location, great spot, and have income to offset your mortgage, and have a separate space for family to come visit.
Yeah, sure.
So I know when you went under contract and bought this place, you looked at a few different ways of renting out the property.
Yeah.
Walk us through what you looked at and what you decided on, and give us some numbers.
Yeah, sure. So when we were doing our due diligence, there was an in-place renter on a month-to-month lease at, I think it was $1,800 a month.
In the ADU.
In the ADU.
And that's a 1-bedroom, 1 bathroom.
It's a 1-bedroom, 1 bath with a kitchenette.
And it's attached to the main house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. and it's got nice, the backyard. It basically has the backyard access, and then there's a large 2.5 car garage, so it has shared access to the garage. And it's a cozy 1 bed 1 bath, but it's a nice space.
Mm-hmm.
So we, when I looked at the numbers in LoHi, and having, I was currently a renter in that market, so I had some experience directly, but also in just kind of looking at comps in the area, I felt like there was upside on that 1800, up to, I think I put my low bar estimate at 1950, and then I thought we could go as high as maybe 2200 and so the strategy as we moved in, this is our first ever tenant, so I started at the 1950 with the thought that we'll get it filled quickly and get some experience, and then we'll have some time to get that second tenant and market it, but we wanted a pretty quick turnaround to get someone in place. So we listed it on a few different places: Airbnb, VRBO, and then also Furnish Finder, which is a site that more targets traveling nurses.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also made a post on a couple different Facebook groups for traveling nurses, and I posted it through my fiance's Facebook. So thinking, there's a little, she's a woman and a young woman that they might relate to a little bit more. So we got a ton of interest.
That's a good tip.
Right off the bat, I mean, it was, I think we got within the first couple days we got I want to say 6 traveling nurses that inquired. 4 of them actually did applications, and so I had applications in hand that all looked pretty qualified, and then simultaneously we were getting a lot of inquiries through Airbnb. This is my first time using Airbnb, and so I actually made a mistake of listing it so that they could instantly book as opposed to me screening. And so I had basically, since I had all these traveling nurses, I just jacked the price up on Airbnb to, I think, $2,600, thinking,
for the month,
for a 1 month.
Okay.
And thinking like, well, I'll go through these traveling nurses, and then in the meantime, someone instantly booked it at $2,600. So I was like, well, maybe we go with the Airbnb. But then in talking to them, they wanted to bring a dog. So I was, I didn't like the idea of our first ever tenant, especially because, it depends on your space, but I think our space had some, it was an older building with some really nice, moldings and like we were just put this new furniture in there. I really didn't want to deal with having a dog potentially rip it up.
Oh, yeah.
So, it wasn't worth the extra few $100s there. So yeah, we all said and done, we ended up canceling that booking on Airbnb and going with one of the nurses that had applied at 1950. And I think, based on the fact that we got that filled so quickly, when and that was a 3-month lease that we put in place with them, but when that runs out, I'm likely looking to try to fill that at the 2,200 for the next tenant.
All right, so let's run this at 2,200 because you think that's probably what the more realistic rent is, right, for the long term. Yeah. Again, get it rented out. Vacancy. So your rough plans to probably rent this out 10 months out of the year and 2 months, friends and family.
Yeah, I think it's kind of TBD. Especially during our parents. I don't know that they'll be visiting this year, but long term that probably makes sense. Something like that. And I've also found, we can kind of use it to, if you have a 1 week gap between renters, it's a good time to invite my friends to come out and visit and kind of that kind of thing. So, but I think if we assume a 2 months out of the year vacancy, that's probably fine.
So what, 16% should be close enough, right?
Sure, yeah.
Rent increase, we'll leave it at 3% because we won't really get into that. Annual appreciation rate. Okay, since you've got a background in real estate, yeah. Hey, we're in a highly appreciating market right now with the environment we're in, but we always like to plan on conservative numbers.
Yeah.
What do you underwrite this appreciation at?
Yeah, so when I was running my numbers, because LoHi is a little bit more of a mature market, it's already appreciated pretty quite a bit. So I ran it at a 3% appreciation rate.
Okay.
And I actually, we ran some different scenarios there, but I felt like that was I still see a lot of upside in Colorado overall with, you look at the amount of people, the inflow into Colorado, and I think that's only increased with the work from home, kind of remote work, all the tech jobs that are flowing here, and we're seeing a ton of demand in LoHi. So I think there's still some upside there.
I agree, but I like to rent 3% to be super conservative.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave your tax rate at 25% to keep it simple and not go down that rabbit's hole. Property management, I'm assuming this is a no.
It's a no, yeah.
Repairs, monthly reserves for maintenance and repairs. Little tricky since you're living there, but like, what do you ballpark for just general maintenance on the house and just turnover and wear and tear and whatever as people come and go throughout the ADU?
Yeah, so again, I think I used a little bit more conservative number and ran that at 8%.
Yeah, I like that.
Perfect.
HOA,
no.
Taxes, I know they are more than that default in there.
Yeah, they are. We could pull up the number. I don't remember offhand what that was.
Okay, so we'll come back.
Should have that memorized, but
now it's on auto pay with the mortgage. What about your insurance?
Yeah, so that ended up being. Pull that as well for you. Sorry.
No, you just give a ballpark or if you.
Yeah, it was. I think we ended up. So we went through an insurance broker, and it was interesting. One of the conversations we had was around the fact that we're going to rent it as an ADU, and so that actually influenced the policies and the coverage we got. So I ended up with one that we would be well protected even with that tenant in place and some of those additional coverages. So I want to say it was about $1,600 for that.
That's still very low.
Yeah.
I mean, for an
Yeah, and taxes were $2,622.
Oh, that's less than I expected. Utilities, have you gotten a feel for what utilities are running out there? It's probably hard to say.
Yeah, because we've only really had about a month of true, us being in there and even less with a tenant in place. But ballparking, I think on the electric bill, I was assuming the average through the year might be like $100 a month, something in that range. I guess we'll find out if it ends up being a little more than that. I think our March bill ended up being closer to $150, but that was we were also running the heater quite a bit, and we hadn't had a tenant in place, so we could run it. I guess if you want to be conservative, you could assume the 150, but I think in my initial numbers I'd used 100.
Yeah, let's be conservative. So about $1,800 for the year. Trash is $0 because it's Denver.
Yeah.
Water, sewer, I mean, what, $1,200, $1,500?
Yeah, something like that.
We'll just say $1,500, be conservative.
Yeah.
Any other expenses? I guess Wi-Fi for you and the guest, right?
Yeah. So I mean, again, it was kind of interesting of what we consider real estate costs versus just our cost of living. So we're sharing our the same Wi-Fi we would have had.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we ran that at about $100 a month or so for some of that, and then I threw in there is a backyard. I mean, I'm not hiring anyone for landscaping, but I think I put in like $50 a month for just like random landscaping related stuff.
Great. All right, so we got all the expenses in here. Lauren, eyeball that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Anything? It all looks good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're going to the next tab here, and we are looking at about a total annual gross income of about $22,000 for the year. Once we take out that approximate 2 months worth of vacancy, about $11,000 in expenses. That's for repairs, maintenance, taxes, insurance, utilities, Wi-Fi, landscaping. And so you are getting about $22,000 a year to offset your mortgage. Now, of course, from a cash flow perspective, it's going to look, very poor because it's a negative $33,000 in cash flow, which is, on paper, it's a horrible investment, but now you're also living there as well. So that turns out to be about $2,500 a month?
The $33,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about $2,800.
Yeah.
So, okay, $2,800 a month. Does that sound about right to what you were estimating?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a 3-bed, 2-bath unit or house that you and your fiance are living in the Highlands.
Yeah. So our unit we're living in is 3-bed, 2.5.
Okay,
bath,
2.5
Yeah.
for $2,800 a month.
Right. Which is, when I thought about it from a cash flow perspective, that was less than we were paying for a 2-bed, 1-bath in 3 blocks away.
What can we ask what that number was?
So our original lease in that space was $2,800, but they were kicking it up to $3,300.
Okay. So we'll say, from break even to actually, you're saving a few $100 a month in cash flow while you're building equity in a place that it's going to hold its value and go up a few bucks.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what the numbers would look like for renting out the main house, for once you were like move out.
So, okay, so actually, I definitely want to do that. So we're going to say great area, great location, works for you and the fiance. It's part of like your master investing plan, and you're living for the same price or less than you're paying for rent in a house. So win, 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 win across all those check boxes. Now, let's just say the ADU, you keep doing medium-term rentals for simplicity. And then when it comes out to a long-term rental, what would you do that main house for, do you think?
So yeah, I pulled a bunch of comps on that to try to come up with a good estimate, and we actually within like a half mile and 1 mile radius, the comps were coming in really high. It was actually like $39.50. I felt like that was maybe a bit high, just in that the even though it was, quite a few beds and baths, it might be, the square footage might be a bit low compared to the comps. So I ended up estimating it at $3,300 for that main unit, and stress tested it, I think, at like $3,000.
All right, so I'll leave that in there for the traveling nurses plus $3,300 a month.
Yeah.
So $5,500 a month in income. I'm gonna drop your vacancy like 5% to make it
right.
Not 2 months empty a year. Now it's positive cash flow, $4,000 a year.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Right. And I was looking at getting over a 5% cap rate in LoHi, very attractive compared to, what we'd been seeing in other properties.
Oh yeah. That's, you don't see 5+ cap rates in LoHi typically. That's what makes this such an amazing deal.
Yeah.
So, coming back here, so let's run really conservative. So we are assuming $2,200 for traveling nurses. Mm-hmm. If you were to do a long-term conservative rental to the 1-bedroom, what would you put it at? $1,900.
Yeah, I think if it was furnished, you can get some. I think the 1950 is probably supportable. And then The 1800 was in place for I think that was it when it was unfurnished. There might be some upside on that even too, but I think that the 1950, if we've already done all the work of furnishing it and that kind of thing, so we might find someone that would be able to use some of that in place stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so we'll just go and drop the rent that really low in the main house from $33,000 to $3,000.
Yep.
So your gross rent drops about $500 a month. And we still have all the utilities, which we'll just leave in here. Mm-hmm. Sure. And you could probably do some utility reimbursement on top of there. But now you're native basically $100 a month.
Right.
So either way, you're right around a break even.
Yeah.
Because we factor in some utilities, you should be break even. Break even to a $5,000 year cash flow. This is a win.
Totally.
Yeah. So I like this a lot. All right. So as we wrap this up, final thoughts, comments, other scenarios you guys want to run?
Nope, I think this is a really good exercise just to kind of see the power of a medium-term rental versus the long-term. It's a small space to furnish, so to get it up and running, the investment cost was really low. And so just being able to see different ways you can play with it, and it's a good loophole too with a medium-term rental versus a short-term, because once they move out, with Denver rules, it has to be your primary house. He wouldn't be able to have the option to do a short-term rental.
But medium term you can though, right?
You can do a medium term, and you don't have the same taxes that you'll get on a short term, and also too just the headache and turnover is a lot less versus a short term.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and we've I think the traveling nurse demographic is a great type of renter to have in there, and thus far that's been proving out. So
and like the location is definitely key, especially for somebody who's young, who's moving to a brand new city. LoHi is definitely top on the list for people to have a good work-life balance.
Oh yeah, that's like top of the list to go on there.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, this was awesome, Brian. So thank you.
Yeah.
And part of what I like to do with the podcast here, since we are hyper local, and I forgot to ask you this before the podcast, but is there anything that you want to network with other people out there in the local investing community? Is there a good way for people to reach you to talk about shop or talk investing? Like, what do you want to get from the community, and how can people reach you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Being newer to the area, I'm excited to meet other folks that, share their interest in real estate and get other, insights into, as we're looking, eventually to get some additional properties, and, just hearing other people's strategies, what's worked, what hasn't in the local market here. Would welcome that and be happy to share more about our experience and how things are playing out with the property. So yeah, I think people can reach me. I have a LinkedIn is usually my main social media I use. So that's not a bad way to reach me.
So if we'll put that link in there and just type in Brian Alperin, right, and they'll find you.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming out. This was awesome.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it was a great process. So thank you for your help, both of you, and we're excited to work with you in the future.
Thank you. Likewise.
Appreciate that.
So listeners out there, if you guys have questions, want more details, reach out to Lauren or me. We can run you through this, and there's always a way to find a property that works for you in the current marketplace. I know a lot of times we're doom and gloom on some stats. We talk inventory, but we consistently find properties that make sense in the current market that also fits our clients' profiles as well. So don't be shy in reaching out. Thanks a lot.